Hey everyone, welcome to Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. My name is George Ortega, and it's 5:44 p.m. on Tuesday, July 13th. And I want to start today's episode by going through the morality of this and bringing God into it. There was a survey taken, I believe in April, by the Associated Press and a few other, I think they were collaborated, with another organization, whatever. Anyway, they asked people if they believed that this coronavirus, or that basically this coronavirus is God telling us that we need to change our ways, and about 63% of the God or higher power believers that they asked believed that yes, they thought that it was, God, really pretty much compelling us to change our ways. And so let's go through this. I mean, this is not an accident. It's not a coincidence that this pandemic originated in animals. Okay, then this specific one seems to have originated with wild animals, but who are treated horribly in these wet markets, in China and across the world. But the problem for us is that, it's not just the wild animals. It's like, we for decades, we have abused and then tortured in so many ways, over 70 billion land animals and many more fish, more tens of billions of fish. Who are sentient, basically a lot of times we have them in these fish farms, completely crowded. Imagine like living your life in Grand Central Station at rush hour, the lobby of Grand Central Station. That's how they live their lives. And they measure stress levels. Fish feel stress just like humans, and naturally animals like chickens and cows, sheep, lambs, they feel pain, and we have been beyond horrible toward them for decades. So yes, it makes sense. Now, all right, I want to get into just like some people say, well, no, this pandemic was not from God. God wouldn't do something like this. Let me address a possibility, okay? Because like for people who believe in God and say God's not responsible for this, I think the other two options are that, well, it's our fault because we have a free will, and that's a tough one. But the other one is, well, this pandemic didn't come from God; it came from Satan or the devil. And so like let's explore this concept of Satan. So like let's go with the perspective that this isn't happening because of God; it's happening because of Satan. Okay, Satan is doing this to us. All right, you have to understand, like, the concept of Satan in Judaism derived from the concept of Satan in the concept of Satan in Christianity derives from the concept of Satan in Judaism, Satan, the great adversary. And basically, the tradition in Judaism is that God created Satan to tempt us, just like Adam. And I know a lot of this stuff is metaphorical, that it didn't really happen, but like, the story of the serpent and the Adam and Eve story in the Garden of Eden, Satan takes the form of a serpent who tempts Adam and Eve to eat, of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and then they get cast off out of the garden, and that's supposed to be the explanation for all our problems. Otherwise we'd be living in paradise. But so like, Satan is a being force, some kind of like active part of the world that has a job. basically Satan first tempts us. And if we fail the temptation, like for example, the temptation to buy cheap meat and fish and dairy, by paying people to torture animals like we do, so God tempts us with that, like, here, I'll give you, like, you can have this beef, these hamburgers, this chicken at a much less price, but you're going to have to torture a lot of animals every year for decades. So like that's the temptation, all right? Then once we fail, once we compromise our morality, big time, like the time, in a way comparable to slavery, the Holocaust, and you name any atrocity we human beings have ever done, this is just as bad or worse. So we fail, and then Satan's next job is to prosecute us. He says, God, like, I tempted them, they failed. So then, and God, yeah, I see, yeah, absolutely, because God is just, God is merciful, God sees what's going on. So then Satan has a third job. Then once, God has adjudicated the case and judged that yes, that humanity in this example is guilty of egregious, beyond belief, abuse and torture of these animals. And I'll get into this, some more, either in this episode or, we're going to go over this over and over until you get this. But once God, makes that judgment, then Satan's job is to punish us, okay? Hence this pandemic, it's killed many hundreds of thousands already. I think there's about 3 million. I'm not sure about the figures. I confuse them between the U.S. figures and the world figures, but a lot of people are, and like the economic collapse, the social distancing. It's been, this is definitely punishment. All right, so if you don't want to blame God, directly, then you have to consider that God, that's Satan's job to do that, right? And incidentally, in Christianity, it isn't this way, but in Judaism, traditional Judaism, Satan is actually on our side. Satan is doing his job, but he really wants us to pass these tests. He wants to not punish us. He's rooting for us, but he's got his job to do. All right, so that is essentially how it might work if you don't want to blame God directly. But then, it's hard to. I don't like to blame God either, but it's hard to get around the fact that God created Satan for this purpose, and anyway. So my point is that God, either directly or indirectly, rewards us when we do good and punishes us when we don't. And this pandemic, this distancing, this economic shutdown is a result of our doing horribly toward these animals. Again, the Bible, God allows us to eat animals. Since the flood, before the flood we were all vegan, but since the flood we're allowed to eat animals, we're not allowed to be cruel toward them. And this is in the Old Testament, it's probably in the New Testament. It's not controversial. People will say, well, there's nothing wrong with eating meat. God allows us to eat meat. Yes, but he doesn't allow you to either torture the cows that you get, let's say, this beef from, or to pay people to commit that torture for you. All right, so I want to just get, back to the theme of the show, because I think it's important to reiterate it at the beginning of each show, and I should have done it before, but all right, the idea is that setting the morality aside, there's only one reasonable way to stay relatively safe of future pandemics. And that is to transition not just this country, but the entire world from farming animals, both family farms and factory farms, to this new industry that began in 2013 called cellular agriculture that allows us to grow our meat and fish and eggs and dairy in sanitized, sterilized, pandemic-free environments, bioreactors, and this, and so in that way, we can be as safe as we're going to be from epidemics, pandemics that are caused by either bacterial or viral influences, bacteria or virus. The bubonic plague was bacteria. The coronavirus and many other influenzas are viruses that come from animals. So that's the only way we're going to be safe. So here's the problem. This new industry started in 2013. Okay, that was the first proof of concept. Now there's about 40, 50 startups that are racing to try to get these products to market because there are some research challenges that need to be met. They have to find the right medium that's cost effective to feed these cells. And basically, to explain the process, basically you take either a cell, you could take it from a blood, drawing blood from an animal. You can even take it from the feather of a bird. It doesn't even have to be, tissue, like a biopsy. You take a little amount, a few cells from an animal, you trick these cells into believing they're still in that animal, you put them in a growth medium, and they will multiply and replicate. And in this way, you can theoretically create as many millions of tons of beef, chicken, dairy, eggs as you want. And that's the goal. In other words, that will allow us to eat all, because we're not, I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan for 15 years. There's about 2% of us in the United States are vegan. But the rest of you who are actually responsible for this, don't blame yourself, like this, you're born into this world, you don't know any better. But because of you, this pandemic is happening. So if we're going to be free of future pandemics, this is the only reasonable means we have. I mean, the other theoretical means are to develop a vaccine, a universal vaccine that works on all, any and every strain of virus, of influenza infection that exists, that can potentially exists. And the same for any kind of bacterial infection, a virus against all bacteria, a vaccine against all bacteria and virus, okay? That's theoretically possible, but if it's to happen, it may not actually be theoretical. It makes sense that it should be possible, but it may not be according to the biology. But if it is possible, it's decades away. Okay, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. So like, once we're out of this, once we're back to this new normal, whatever it's going to look like in a year or two, I don't know how long it's going to take, unless we fast track this research, get, 40, 50 startups working on this. There should be 400 or 500 startups working on this. And right now, collectively, they have generated between 500 million and $1 billion in investment, to help them meet the research and development challenges that are preventing them from making these products in an inexpensive enough manner so that they will compete with the meat and dairy and eggs that we buy in supermarkets now that come from animals. So that's the goal. So like, the problem is like, yes, if at the current rate of funding, it may and probably will take over 10 years for many of these products to come to market. We might get hamburger and chicken nuggets in a few years if we're lucky. We've got, I think, yeah, but and actually they haven't like even scaled. I mean, like right now, a hamburger costs $10. Or actually, no, they're predicting they haven't even achieved that. So like we may get some of these products available in a few years, but the vast majority, if you want sirloin steak or a lot of these products at a competitive price, it may take over 10 years. And the problem for us is that we may not have 10 or 15 years, whatever, until the next pandemic strikes. And so like what I'm proposing, what this series is about, is that there was a government, Forbes on June, was it June 2nd? Yeah, they reported that the United States Congressional Budget Office estimates that this pandemic is going to cost the United States about $8 trillion. Okay, that's just the United States, not the, the rest of the world. And again, this estimate was done, think about it, in May, because it was this news article came out June 2nd. So this doesn't take into account the huge surge in cases we've experienced in June and now in July. We're midway through July 2020. So it may, it'll probably extend to 10 trillion. Now here's the thing: if we take 8 trillion as the amount, let's say that this is costing economically, and this is aside from the emotional cost, the loss of life, the disruption to our social activity and all. Okay, let's say that's our target. We want to avoid having to spend another $8 trillion on the next one that might actually be a lot worse. Others have been worse. The 1918 influenza killed, some say, 50 million people. AIDS has killed, about over 20 million. We might be lucky in terms of in a lot of ways. So anyway, think this through. Think the logic of this through. Let's say you're a homeowner, right? The average cost of a home is $220,000 here in the United States. The average person pays about $1,000 a month in homeowners insurance. And we know that most homes, the likelihood of a fire burning down a home or a hurricane destroying it or a tornado is exceedingly thin, whereas the likelihood of a next pandemic is certain, And any infectious disease expert is going to tell you it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And they've been saying this for years, for several decades, in fact. So think of the logic of this. I mean, like spending, let's say, $1,000 a year on homeowners insurance over 10 years, that's $10,000. That amounts to about 4% of the cost, the price that you pay for the home if you pay $220,000. Okay, now what I'm suggesting, that get done immediately is that our U.S. government invest $50 billion in fast tracking this research so we can have these products in supermarkets not in 10 or 15 years and have to spend 10 or 15 years in dread of the next pandemic, but so we can be safe as possible, as soon as possible. $50 billion, which, how much does that amount to relative to the $8 trillion that we've spent? It's about 0.06%, 0.5% of the amount we're going to spend on this pandemic. So it makes absolutely no sense to not spend this money and spend it as quickly as possible. That's what this show is about. All right, so we've got about 10 more minutes, and I want to just go through. I'm going to share my screen. This is a cool feature that Zoom has, and I'm going to show you some. I hope this works. First time I'm using it, at least for the show. I'm going to show you some graphs and charts that show why we have this problem. And the other part of this is, some people say, well, this is just a 1 in 100 year event. No, because of the 1918, influenza, Spanish flu, that killed again 50 million people. So no, AIDS killed over 20 million. That was in 1980. There was a 1957 pandemic. There was 1968 pandemic. Then since then, in the 2000s, there's been Ebola, MERS, SARS, Zika, and they're increasing. So let's go over some of these. Let's see if this works. Let's go over some of these numbers. Okay, now this the problem comes from an overconsumption from breeding animals. Okay, so I hope you can see this. All right, so here's from 1968 to 2018, if you can see this, this is the growth in the number of animals that we've eaten. So it's gone really high from 10 billion to over 80 billion in 50 years. And that's the problem. That's why we can expect more and more of these pandemics. All right, so that's one chart. Got a few others. Now, Okay, here's some of the diseases that, come on, some of the diseases that, oh, this is like, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, I'll make it larger. That, all right, the animals, the pathogens, zoonotic, yeah, zoonotic means that they come from animals, and then the method of transfer, you can't see this, but basically if you can, you know, a lot of them come from bats, but bats will, for example, bite a camel or a pig or a bird. I don't see birds on here, but they're a part of it. They're a major part of it, actually. So anyway, these pandemics come from different animals, different ones, from cattle. I can't see this. Hold on, let me. Yeah, no, I'm going to have to get a better version of this. So these again, these pandemics are coming from viruses. Okay. Now, all right, here's the cumulative number of virus species, because these virus species, that's why we can't wait. You know, the more we wait, the more in danger we become. Hold on for a second. I got like, no, somebody's at the door, but I want to finish this. I think it's somebody, it's a delivery. Somebody's, all right, hold on, some of these. Yeah, hold on for a second. Yeah, wait, hold on. Sorry, I was in the middle of recording something. I'll be with you. Yes. Yeah, you wait for a minute. Who is it? All right. Reading, you're going to prove the reading. No, I was like on recording something. I'll do a television show with this. Are you going to come in again? Yeah, after you. Okay. Thanks. All right, so like I'm back just briefly. I just checked the file and for some reason it recorded for 25.5 minutes. This is a 28-minute show, so I gotta like record another 2.5 minutes of whatever. Um, Again, we have a choice. We can come out of this pandemic and then live in dread and fear. When's the next one going to come? How much, it could be 10 times more devastating than this one, both economically and in terms of health and all. We can do that, or we can be smart, we can be responsible. We can spend at least, again, like 0.5% of this 8 trillion that this pandemic is going to cost us to prevent as best we can future pandemics in about 3-4 years. That's a bargain. We should probably be spending, 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion, but 50 billion should be enough. Again, like leave it to the experts. There's 50 startups. Again, they need engineers to design these new bioreactors. They need biologists, biochemists to perfect a lot of these techniques. There's various strategies, and it's not all that complex. It's probably easier, with the challenges they're working on than the challenges that we're working on to create a virus, a vaccine for this virus. So, all right, now I'm going to have to like put these two clips together, and I guess that shouldn't be too difficult. All right, so talk to people, talk to your friends about this, send a link to this, once I get them on YouTube, or just like, they're on the White Plains Community Media website, okay? You could find an episode there, send a link to a friend, a politician, somebody in the media, get them to start covering this, because the politicians are only going to do this when we demand that we do this, and the time is now. If you wait 3-4 years, the politicians are so stupid, too many of them, that they'll just forget about this. They're worried about their own reelection. So again, the time to do this is now. And again, I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks.